The training compound was silent before dawn. Mist rolled off the ocean, curling through the obstacle course like ghosts from forgotten wars. The smell of saltwater and diesel filled the air. The recruits had been awake since 0400, shivering, muddy, half-broken from days of relentless drills. But this morning was different. This morning, the instructors had said someone special was coming. Someone who would test them in ways they couldn't imagine. The 12 recruits stood in formation, boots digging into the cold sand. Most were men, broad-shouldered and sleepless, their faces carved by exhaustion. They whispered about who the newcomer might be, a commander, a legend, maybe even a SEAL veteran. None expected what they were about to see. Out from the fog stepped a figure in black tactical gear. Compact frame, calm stride, a ponytail tucked under a cap marked with the trident insignia. She carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who'd seen war and lived through it. Her name was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Hale. To most of the Navy, she was a myth, the first woman ever to complete SEAL training, though few had actually met her. To the 12 recruits, she looked impossibly calm for someone walking into the lion's den. The chief instructor barked her name, announcing that she would be leading a live combat evaluation drill. No one moved. Sarah's eyes scanned the lineup. 12 young faces, a mixture of arrogance, doubt, and raw potential. "You've all read about missions," she said quietly, voice cutting through the wind, "but reading is not knowing. Today, you'll learn what knowing feels like." The recruits didn't respond. One smirked, thinking it was some kind of motivational talk. She noticed, of course. She noticed everything. Without warning, the klaxon sounded. The drill began. Simulated rounds cracked through the air. Smoke grenades hissed. The field exploded in chaos. The 12 recruits scattered, seeking cover, shouting instructions that tangled in panic. And then, out of the smoke, she moved. Sarah Hale became a ghost. In 40 seconds, she dismantled every illusion they had of strength. She sprinted across open ground, disarmed the first recruit with a feint and counter lock that sent his weapon flying. The second never saw her coming. She rolled through his defense and pinned him in 2 moves. The others tried to regroup, shouting, forming a perimeter, but her timing was flawless, calculated, cold, exact. She used the terrain, the shadows, the smoke. By the 30th second, half of them were on the ground. By the 40th, all 12 were down, stunned, panting, and silent. The timer beeped. The field went still again. The instructors said nothing. The only sound was the ocean, crashing in slow rhythm, like applause from the horizon. Sarah stood over the recruits, breathing steady. "Strength," she said finally, "isn't muscle. It's control. It's knowing when to strike, and when not to." She looked at each of them, not with contempt, but with challenge. "The Navy doesn't care who you are. Out here, you're defined by what you can endure." One of the recruits, the youngest, asked how she'd learned to fight like that. She didn't answer. Instead, she motioned for them to follow her. The next phase began, the endurance circuit. It was 12 miles through mud, over steel walls, across freezing surf zones. By mile 3, 2 recruits had dropped out. By mile 5, another vomited from dehydration. Sarah never slowed. She carried her own pack, heavier than theirs, never once glancing back. Every step she took broke another piece of their pride. But she wasn't there to humiliate them. She was there to teach them what the word team meant when lives were on the line. Hours passed. The sun rose higher, burning away the fog. The ocean turned silver. At the halfway checkpoint, one of the recruits, Mason, stumbled. His ankle was twisted, his voice cracked. The others hesitated, unsure whether to help or push forward. Sarah dropped her gear, lifted him by the shoulder, and said quietly, "You don't leave anyone behind. Not even in training." The others followed. For the first time, they moved as one unit. As the day stretched on, the recruits began to see what made her different. It wasn't speed or power. It was precision, patience, and presence. She didn't waste movement or breath. When one of them faltered, she steadied them. When one doubted, she pushed them past it. Each challenge stripped away ego until only raw will remained. By sunset, they were crawling through the last obstacle, the underwater infiltration tunnel. Cold, dark, suffocating. Panic set in fast, but her voice came through the intercom, steady, unflinching. "Breathe. Count the seconds. Trust yourself." They made it through. That night, gathered around a dim campfire on the beach, the 12 recruits sat in silence, exhausted beyond thought. Sarah joined them, holding a tin mug of coffee, her face lit by flame. One of the recruits asked if she had ever been afraid. She stared at the horizon for a long moment before answering. "Fear doesn't disappear," she said. "You just learn to walk with it." Then she told them about her first mission, classified, years ago, somewhere in the Pacific. Her team had been ambushed during an extraction. They were outnumbered. Every plan had fallen apart. The only reason she survived was because her instructor had once told her, "Calm is contagious." She'd remembered that and held the line until reinforcements arrived. That line had become her creed. The recruits listened, truly listened, for the first time. They began to understand what the training was really about. Not glory, not recognition, survival, brotherhood, or in this case, something larger, unity. Weeks passed. The 12 recruits finished their course under her supervision. Each day was harder than the last. They carried logs across the surf, ran night navigation in freezing rain, and learned to operate in complete silence. Every challenge tested their limits. But Sarah Hale was always there, first to arrive, last to leave. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence demanded excellence. Then came the final evaluation, a full mission simulation known as Black Current. It was the Navy's most brutal training exercise, designed to mimic the chaos of real war. The recruits were to infiltrate an island, rescue hostages, and extract under fire. The catch? Everything was live except the bullets. The sea was real. The exhaustion was real. The fear, undeniable. They launched at midnight. Rain hammered the boats. Lightning ripped through the sky. The recruits moved through the surf, guided by her hand signals. The mission unfolded with precision until, halfway through, a simulated explosion separated the team. The comms went dead. Panic surged again. But Sarah was calm. She regrouped them in the shadows, improvised a new route, and executed a silent extraction that would later be studied by instructors for its perfection. When they returned to base at dawn, covered in mud and salt, the chief instructor was waiting. He looked at Sarah, then at the recruits. "What do you think you just learned?" he asked. No one answered. Finally, Sarah spoke. "They learned to trust what they've built inside." The instructor nodded. "Then they're ready." Graduation day came. The 12 recruits stood in formation again, clean uniforms this time, medals gleaming faintly in the morning light. When Sarah walked past, They saluted her, not because she outranked them, but because she'd earned it in their eyes. She stopped before the youngest one, Mason, the same one she'd carried that day on the trail. "Remember," she told him softly, 40 seconds can change everything, not because of what you do, but because of who you become." Years later, stories of that training day spread through the Navy, how one woman, surrounded by 12 recruits, proved in 40 seconds that leadership wasn't about gender or strength, but mastery of self. And whenever new recruits asked if the story was true, the veterans would smile and say, "You'll find out when the fog rolls in." The ocean keeps no records. But those who trained under her never forgot the lesson, that the measure of a SEAL isn't found in how loud he shouts or how hard he hits, but in how quietly he commands respect when everything else falls apart. And somewhere, beyond the horizon, a lone figure still runs the shoreline at dawn, boots hitting the sand in rhythm with the tide, preparing, always, for the next 40 seconds that might define a lifetime.